La un moment dat, de masa lui Fifi s-a apropiat un bărbat foarte înalt, solid, cu o față îmbujurată, aproape apoplectică, îmbrăcat într-un parpalac lung, negru, ca un fel de pelerină, sub care se vedea un smoking impecabil, cu o cămașă albă de mătase și un papion violet. Individul purta o pălărie neagră, cu boruri largi. La mâna dreaptă avea un imens ceas de aur, iar pe degetul mare un ghiul gros de aur alb, la fel ca pe degetul mic și pe inelarul mâinii stângi. Deși terasa era aproape goală, individul s-a apropiat spre Fifi și l-a întrebat cu o voce profundă de bas.
Nu vă fie cu supărare. Poți să mă așez la masa lumatale?
Poftiți, cu plăcere, a spus Fifi, arătându-și gingiile roșii și dantura ușor îngălbenită de tutun, cu cei doi canini superiori ceva mai lungi decât normal. Apoi s-a întors la cataiful lui. Era destins, comunicarea susținută de dimineață la secțiunea Lucian Blaga, abordări semiotice, avusese succes. După ce l-a privit cu atenție câteva minute pe Fifi, Matahala supraelegantă a tușit ușor ca să-i atragă atenția și a început.
Nu te supăra. Nu cumva ești din neamul lui Boier Drăculea?
Poftim?
Boier Drăculea de la Perișani. N-auziși de el. Dar iartă-mă, nu mă prezentai. Boboieru. Elvis Boboieru.
Și a întins o mână mare cât o lopată cu degetele groase și păroase, dar cu unghiile îngrijite. Politicos și nedumerit, Fifi a întins și el mâna, pe care Elvis a strâns-o ca într-o menghină. Florin Angelescu Dragolea.
Drăculea?
Nu. Dragolea.
Dragolea, tot un drac. Dar dacă zici matale că nu, numai că zău. Tare semen cu Boier Drăculea.
Cu cine?
Spusei, cu boierul Atanasă Drăculea de la Perișani.
Perișani.
Zici de Perișani, plaiul Perișanilor, de la Râmnicu Vâlcii, peste Olt, sub munte.
Da, interesant.
Auziși, da semen cu boierul leit picătură, eu știu ce spui. Am poza lui acasă la mine pe perete, în sala amare a palatului. O am de la îl bătrân, de la moșul meu Nilă fiertat, care o ținea în casă ca pe o icoană. Dar eu făcui de 100 de ori mai mare și tot un ramă de aur, ceva frumos. Și ne zicea, bă, nu uitați, ăsta-i boierul Drăculea, el ne-a făcut oameni, de nu era Drăculești, nu era nici boboierii, noi le-am dat sângele nostru, dar ei ne-au dat de toate, până și numele.
Numele, a devenit Fifi brusc atent.
Numele boierului, boboierul, pricepuși?
Da, eliziune, contragere.
Zi cum vrei, dar de acolo vine. Ăștia misa lui Mandea, boieri, boboierii, țigani de viță veche. Și-a îndreptat un deget gros și păros spre papionul violet.
Dacă așa ziceți dumneavoastră,
Zi-mi tu că mata ești boier și eu țigan.
țigan?
Țigan, că doar noi fi rom. Ce te uiți așa la mine? Toți vreau acum să ne zică la toți romi. La mie nu-mi place, eu sunt țigan. Dar de mătasă, țigan de vatră, mai exact, țigan boier. Am la bani să-i întorci cu lopata, să mă îmbrac cum vrea mușchii mei. Ce, ți se pare că-s prea însolit? Poate îți, dar face bine la business. Nu poți vinde sânge în Germania dacă arăți ca un corturar.
Sânge?
Asta că ți explic eu mai încolo. Dar mai întâi să zic cum e cu boul boierului, te interesează?
Fără supărare, dar de ce ar trebui să mă intereseze? A zis Fifi, dând să se întoarcă la cătaiful lui.
Fii, ce semen cu boier, drăculea! Și el răspundea la întrebare cu o altă întrebare. Boier de boier!
Dar n-am nicio legătură cu...
N-ai, eu zic că ai, că de-aia stau la masă cu matale în loc să învăț de business-ul meu. Povestea așa, din moș strămoși, de pe vremea lui Vlad Țepeș, Drăculești de la Perișani avea câte un țigan, îl mai zdravă și mai sănătos, care îi dădea sânge boierului. Acum mai zice transfuzie, cu doctori, aparate, chestii, trestii, prostii. Scotea țiganului sânge de aici, imediat sub ureche, unde avea tatuat un punct roșu într-o ulcică și gata. Pe urmă, boierul îl bea. Și tot așa câte o porție de 2 ori pe săptămână.
Și nu murea.
Cine, boierul? Păi nu-ți spusei. De-aia bea sânge, să nu moară fără vreme. This is just a fragment of several hundreds pages of similar fragments. I mean, this is one of the greatest comedies, I think, in Romanian literature. And I think that it should be studied and it should be considered in a Romanian cultural environment. I mean, when it was published in 2012, several reviews appeared, but now I haven't heard many people speaking about Nepotul lui Dracula, and I think that we should do something more in this regard. I think that I have spoken enough. Of course, I could continue, but I think that we have here Mr. Adrian. Would you like to say some words now or later? Or yes, yes. So I think that Professor Adrian Lăcătuș, who was a friend of, am I right? And a colleague of Alexandru Mușina. I never had the chance to meet him or to know him personally, but I can say that I'm fond of this novel and I really like it. So maybe you could say us a few words about the context, about the professor. And
I'm sorry, for introduction.
but actually you came at the right moment. So
Yeah. So
I think that Professor Adrian Lăcătuș also is the dean of the Faculty of Letters. And
yes, so
honored that he is here. with
thank
us.
you, thank you. So I don't know if Professor Crişan made an introduction about the author. For Alexandru Mușina was one of the greatest Romanian contemporary poets and a very sharp literary theorist. So he's well known in Romanian contemporary literature as a leading poet of the 80s generation and as a leading theorist of contemporary poetry with some concepts of his own about the new anthropocentrism or the poetry of the everyday and but also in the university in this university he used to teach ethnology and a sort of anthropological approach to literary folklore and comparative literature and poetry and creative writing, which was a pioneering figure of introducing creative writing into Romanian universities in the early 90s as academic discipline. So, but he was also a sort of trickster, and this novel, I think, is not so well known as the rest of his work in poetry and theory, because as a parody as it is, as Professor Crişan stressed, it was like his sort of literary toy project or amusement. And it's a campus novel, like I don't know, the novels of David Lodge or other authors, comedy and campus novel, but also he wanted to put it into a imaginative framework of the myth that's defining this place, and he had this dream of exporting it to broader audiences, broader readers, and the vehicle of Dracula would be probably the perfect tool to do this. So because he was also an editor, Mușina, and the novel was published at his own publishing house, Aula, and he also wanted to sell it in numbers and make money, because he was a keen also businessman sometimes. So it was Alexander Mușina was very complex and contradictory figure, a great man indeed. So yes, you can hear so many voices in there. He was not a prose writer. This is his first novel, actually. He used to in the early 90s they had an attempt to publish another parody of a novel, but it was written in a small collective together with other 3 writer friends, and it was a sort of a noir novel or a policier or a crime novel, where the main characters were figures of the literary world disguised as officers of securitate, or former officers of securitate, who tried to solve several crimes, and it was really hilarious. But the literary and academic establishment was not very happy when this novel was published, because they had their names in there. So this is the sort of trickster Alexander Mușina was, and yes, for us we can recognize ourselves in several of the characters in this book. Yeah, my colleague Virgil Borcan, who's the main. I mean, he's not the main character. He's the guy behind the main character. Yeah, it's. But also there is some maybe more subtle connection between this kind of work, the academic work, and the idea of the vampire, because Mușina used to joke that we have some colleagues who suck the energy out of students. They are always surrounded by students and by young students, like a small court that follow them everywhere, because they need that energy so much. Otherwise, they will just, I don't know, collapse into depression. And so that was a thing that he, before he started to write this novel, he thought about, and we joked about this kind of stuff. You had other colleagues who would not let you go or let you leave late at night in conversations and in debates, because they wanted to, they seemed so attached actually to you and drain you actually. So we used to joke about this thing, and from that psychological and psychosocial reality that is characteristic to these environments, where we live together and close together, people from different generations and from different things. The leap to the narrative of Dracula and the blood-sucking academic was somehow a natural play. So yes, unfortunately, probably as Professor Crişan said, Alexander Mușina left us 10 years ago already, in his full creative capacity, and yeah, it has been a terrible loss for us as a group, as a school. We try to carry on his legacy, especially in the way we put poetry as the most creative, linguistic and intellectual endeavor in the middle of the school, in the middle of the university. And this is probably our thing that we are still doing. Thank you.
You would say now about this conference?
Oh, I think you will be thrilled. There is a Dracula conference in Brașov. Yes, he was very he liked a lot debates and conferences. I don't know. Yes, probably he wouldn't. He probably would not like to be the object of the debate or of the discussion. Will feel a little bit awkward in that position, but the general debate he would have really much appreciate, I think. Yeah.
What about your role in the novel? Can you say a few words? Because we don't know.
I was one of the members of the COI, the Club of Intelligent Men, and that was a real thing that we did every Wednesday night. Every 2 weeks, every second week in the Wednesday night, we go in a restaurant in either Roata Norocului or here in Săgeana. There were 4 of us, and so it was 2 pairs of people in this thing, and we just, I don't know, gossip the whole academic literary world or discuss serious ideas. It doesn't matter. And Mușina was paying the bill every night, so we were his guests because he, besides being a professor and earning a salary, which back then were not so big, he was our capitalist. I mean, he was our entrepreneur with this publishing house, and also with some small real estate investments that he made. So he was generous, and the meetings in this club, informal club, were very very fun. Yeah, and yeah, I think I have a minor role. I was, of course, younger and more interesting back then. So
could we do something to promote the study of this book in, no, maybe the academic?
I think the first step would be a translation. Yeah.
About the Romanian environment, because the book is not known enough in the Romanian academic world. Would it be dangerous to study to discuss
No,
it?
of course not.
Do you think it is?
Yeah, there is no danger. No, it's
Yes,
it's
dangerous.
it's the type of harmless vampire. Yeah. I mean, what can you do? You cannot force the attention upon a book. There's a lot of great books that fall into critical oblivion. This has been seen since the beginning as a sort of curiosity, because the author was not a novelist, or was not a popular narrative novelist. He was this important and very relevant poet, and I think most of the people saw the book as a sort of I don't know, comedy experiment, entertaining himself and the others with this narrative.
The problem is Romanian literature lacks this stress on comedy. We need to speak about comedy.
Yeah.
Because comedy also is in our blood, not only tragedy and
yes, and we don't have, I think, the comic novel is a very important European tradition, and probably is or underrepresented now in Romanian contemporary literature. Yeah, and everyone writes serious novels or dramatic, if not serious. Yeah, everyone is looking for drama and trauma, and from this point of view, it could be another edition, and probably a translation would relaunch the perspective upon this book. If you have,
I was just going to say, I think I spoke to you last year online about this.
You want to?
Thank you. Yeah, I spoke to you last year about the need for an English translation in particular, because after speaking to you, now I'm here in Brasov, seeing all the sites associated with the book. It's even become more apparent that we really need to have a look to see what this is, because there's such a historical impact, even if it's still a comedy. So I think an English translation is desperately needed. So please somebody.
We have some friends, native speakers, writers, translators. Yeah, it's an idea.
Nina, I don't know who's the moderator.
You are. Okay, I second the request of the translation, because I remember you were talking about this book even in another conference in Brasov in 2018. Yeah, I understand that, but I wanted to read it since then, and I believe it's going to push the research even in Romania, because when the foreign researchers are starting to analyze the novel, the researchers from Romania will try to like the counter argument some things that were wrongly put in the discourse. And I have another questions, because you were mentioning other books about Dracula written by Romanians. I am really interested if you heard about the book written by Dana Grigorsea, Die nicht sterben. Dana Grigorsea is a reporter from Bucharest, and she wrote a book in German in 2021, and it's also about Dracula. It's a novel, yeah, but it was recently translated into Polish. I don't know if it was translated in Romanian. I am doing like a very small side project. I don't have anything to do since I finished my PhD. So I basically started an Instagram account, and I am doing like a marathon of the novels, like retellings and interpretations of the Dracula novels. And I am trying to find like key meanings in each of the books that tell us something about the Stoker's book. And I was really interested in getting the Romanian perspective. And because my Instagram account is in Polish, I couldn't like took Romanian books. So I had to find something that was translated in English or in Polish. So I used the Dana Grigorsea Die nicht sterben book. And also I could read Jan Cornelius' book. It was like essays, but there was almost nothing about Dracula. So I believe it may interest you. So I think it was translated also in English, but I'm not sure.
I just want to say, Marius, apart from the fact that this is an incredibly interesting novel with a Romanian context, I think it also develops another theme within Gothic that we need to be aware of, and that is basically campus Gothic or university Gothic. People talk about Robertson Davies's material. This is far funnier. I mean, Robertson Davies is funny, don't get me wrong, but this sounds even funnier. And it really, translation, it's got to happen. There's no way, it's got to happen.
Țiganiada, Iomul de Deleanu. I mean, we can find some connections between Țiganiada, but I'm not sure that Țiganiada was translated into English. I wanted to speak about Țiganiada, but this is one of the Romanian classical works of Romanian literature, but it has not been translated into English because it's a poem, a long poem, narrative, of course, a narrative in lyrics, written at the end of the 18th century. So it's a bit difficult to be read even in Romanian, full of suggestions and of references. So it's somehow difficult to be understood in Romanian. But
which is a very interesting, it's also a parody of the heroic epic in the classical period. It's like an army of the Gypsy or republic of the Gypsies, a sort of trying to debate a type of society with a whole level of philosophical conversation in the footnotes. So that there is a whole conclave of intellectuals and authors debated in the footnotes what's happening above. the turmoil of the world of the gypsies and everything. So it's very complex and very interesting. And somehow this novel of Mușina also it's also a parody and a comedy of the contemporary academic world. So it is a campus novel, but not only that it refers or renders the social world of this environment, the bubble of the academic life, but also its entitlement to knowledge, to seek the truth, the fashions, the trends that cross the academic world in the contemporary, the imposters, all sorts of figures that are representative for this environment today. So, for instance, Fad. Yes, of course. Who's successful? What are the measures for success in this world? What kind of tricks they use to be productive? For instance, Fad is writing these essays about Proust, which have the references completely invented. So he just invents references on Proust and theories and authors, and so instead of looking for them into the library, just comes up with titles and then drops it into the body of the paper, the academic paper, and nobody knows, nobody figures this out. It's just the same. Yeah. And this is this kind of and actually I can disclose maybe an interesting thing that Mușina took one of these essays himself and published in an academic paper. But the essay was the essay of his character, Fad, and he published it in an academic paper, and it got published, and nobody said anything. It was full of ideas, but it's the same text from here. So he himself tried this experiment, and it worked. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Lately it's been done. There are authors who try to test the editor's vigilance, and they managed to sneak into journals work that were counterfeit and completely bogus. But Mușina did this immediately after the novel came out in that year, I think, and it was good. With AI, yes, but that was before AI. Yeah, 10 years ago or 11 years ago. Pre-AI. Yeah. So yeah, so the novel is really indeed, I mean, it's comedy, it's multi-level, and it's satire, because it's this, of course, the genre of the satire against the morgue and in unlegitimate entitlement of the academic world is strong in there too.
Thank you so much for your illuminating intervention.
Okay, thank you very much, Marius. That was brilliant. You never disappoint to provide a fantastic performance. We've always we're really looking forward to it. I keep saying that Marius's place is on stage in the limelight, performing, singing, dancing. Yeah, we're just going to.
So that I can bring it out.
Yeah, I'm just going to not. All right, thank you. And oh yes, of course, and Bogdan, of course, provided a performance as well. All right, so over to Florin, and we're continuing.
Yeah, so I'm taking the job of the chair of this section, but I could not start to be chair of this section because Magda meeting Marius, and then in 2016 with Hans and so on. This 15 with Marius and with Hans in the with that Congress that we did not know exactly if it's the first one or no, maybe not. So the first one is 2018. Let's settle that this is the 4th edition, yes?
Yeah, is it the fourth? Because initially we started on, as I said yesterday already, but we started with Hans Druus, who's been here just a moment ago and he disappeared now. But we started in 2016, but that was the first Dracula Congress, and Hans was the initiator of this event, and I joined the organization, so we organized it together, but that was a different name. Our first conference organized together, but it was a different name. And later on, after Dublin, after this 2016, we decided to set something of our own. And then that's how Children of the Night was born. And we met Florin as well. And that's why we're here, guys. So this is a piece of history here.
Okay, so going back to the role of moderator for this section. So now I will present a paper, so it's very interesting. Actually, the co-authors, because it's a big diagonal between Ireland and Australia. So we have here Peadar OD from the Maynooth University from Ireland, and Adam Owsinski that you already saw in the morning with another presentation from Charles Darwin University, Australia. And their paper, it's about disabilities and vampires. Peadar OD is having 31 years old and is a disabled activist and lecturer from Maynooth University in the Republic of Ireland, with a Master of Arts in Disabilities Studies and the experience working with on UN CRPD. This is a part of the UN, yes? UN Convention for the Right of Persons with Disabilities committee at the European level, and working on the level of disability rights. He is also a policy officer and the founding member of Disability Power Ireland, and has an interest in Dracula and Bram Stoker more widely since the young age, yes. So also he last year won the Golden Bat for the best original research at last year Children of the Night Dracula Congress. And for those that were not here at the previous presentation of Adam, I will present again. Adam Owsinski, 41 years old, is an early stage career researcher at Charles Darwin University in Australia. He also recently completed his PhD in philosophy and sociology. His interests are in philosophy of language and mind, focusing on cultural evolution and cultural transmission in pop culture. He's also neurodiversity advocate and the National Disability Insurance Scheme manager in Australia. So now the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So yeah, a brief story about, I guess, how we met, right?
Yes.
Was as a result of this conference last year. And since we're in similar fields and as a result of Peter's original presentation, we were like, we have to get together and write a book. So we decided to do a book on disabilities and vampirism and how disabilities were perceived in certain texts and the general attitude of the era as well. So just a bit about what we're going to discuss. Peter's section is a historical explanation on some of the vampire scares and related to New England and the Brown family in particular, and how a lot of these cases were actually multiple sclerosis and various other disabilities, and they were taken as vampirism. I'm going into an area which I've dubbed disgusting transmissions, which look at the historical and cultural transmissions of the Victorian freak show and how they've not only impacted contemporary society's understanding, but also the Gothic literature texts that we actually read and enjoy today. So I'll give it to Peter.
Hello, Is this? Yeah. Yeah. Hello, everyone. Thanks. Yes. So, so I'm going to start with a brief overview of initially I was interested in the question of where is there a kind of history of linking disability and vampirism. I think the overall conclusion would have to be the answer is uncertain, leaning towards probably negative, but there are some interesting conclusions that can be drawn. So specifically the Brown family of Exeter, Rhode Island in 1892, they had an extreme version of what we would call tuberculosis, or what they would call consumption, but they called this particular version galloping consumption. At the time, it was it effectively just killed you even quicker. So it was their mother got it and died, and I think their two daughters had it. Their son was Edwin was also infected. The father's son, Edwin, was also infected with it, but he was sent off by friends to try and get recover at Springs. But then it was believed that the youngest daughter, Mercy Brown, a superstitious rumor spread that she was a vampire, and it was a way, an attempt to get rid of the consumption. They dug up her body and they cut out her heart and liver, and they fed it to Edwin while he was dying. Unsurprisingly, this didn't work, and in fact, it killed him even quicker. But it gives you an interesting idea into the treatment of some people who had diseases like tuberculosis. It's also interesting note in Bram Stoker's notes for Dracula, he has a newspaper cutting for a vampire plague that he collected that was published in the New York World in 1896, and it mentions the article speculates that maybe some people who were alleged to be vampires were actually people with diseases who were buried alive. So the article doesn't offer much evidence that this actually happened, but it asks the question. And Bram, in the only interview he ever gave about Dracula a month after its publication, did actually reference the idea that maybe some people who are historically linked to vampirism may have been wrongly buried alive due to illness. So it's interesting to note that these issues were being talked about, and it's so you can see some historical influence on the idea of literary vampirism as well.
So in my part, I use historical ontology and a form of study that we call cultural transmissions, where I'm trying to create an historical track which links all the Gothic literature texts that we were talking about to the implication of not only the freak show and the Victorian freak show and how they would have influenced the ideas of people with disabilities, but also prior to that and some early influences, like we're saying with the church, and how they might have dubbed certain disabilities like consumption or MS or even disfiguration and called it vampirism. And cultural transmissions, basically what we look at is a text, a film, any form of culture that's produced, and we try to create this, like I said, historical track. So that's basically what I'm trying to do with my text. And as a result, we both have 2 chapters in the book. Mine was on, like I said, disgusting transmissions, but you're going to talk about Dracula.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about disability studies reading of Dracula, and so I'm going to use so my plan is I'm going to look primarily at the first 4 chapters of Dracula, which is Jonathan Harker arriving in Transylvania and being effectively imprisoned in Castle Dracula. I'm going to use them as a theoretical lens, the work of Michel Foucault, primarily his work Discipline and Punish, where he talks about the creation of the prison system, and how it leads to control and power over people. So, I mean, Foucault is an interesting figure in terms of disability studies because he also wrote about a history of madness, but which you could argue could be tied into an political study of Renfield, but I'm not going to focus on that for the book. It might, it would be a bit too meandering. So my study instead is going to look at the first 4 chapters from a Foucauldian lens, but also it's worth bringing up the social model of disability, which argues that disabled people are not only limited by their conditions, whether those conditions be blindness or deafness or anything else, but actually by social barriers. So it's, if you think about Jonathan Harker at the start of Dracula, he may not appear to be disabled, but in the context of he's going into the realm of a supernatural creature who has significantly more physical powers than him. So Harker is initially disabled by the domain of Castle Dracula. It's an interesting parallel that disabled people having to adapt to barriers in the real world. You can see this partly parallel in Dracula when Harker has to start thinking and acting like the Count in order to actually escape the vampire. He decides to climb down the wall of the castle after he sees Dracula doing it, as that becomes his escape route. Of course, Dracula himself is also limited, though, as the novel goes on, as he moves away from the environment that enabled him, and you learn about his numerous weaknesses, whether it be garlic or holy water or cannot cross water. Or he has to navigate all of these barriers, which, whether it be using a boat or hypnotism or having agents who you could see maybe as a stand-in for personal assistance. So yeah, to enable him to actually achieve his goals. So yeah, that's going to be my chapter in the book, Disability Studies, reading of Dracula, primarily its first act.
Yeah, so as a result of these influences in terms of meeting these, or the barriers that we were discussing, we were both actually big admirers of Michel Foucault's work, which also linked us together because we wanted to talk about the power establishment and certain systemic problems in terms of how do we portray a book with disabilities in terms of empowerment as well, that allowed people to then connect these dots, so to speak, because again, that's where the historical ontology comes into it, where we need to tie in these particular works to show that the power establishment actually not only creates these disabilities to a degree, but also extends them. So this is why I started to look at the attitudes of not only contemporary society towards people with disabilities and where it actually comes from, because there were certain attitudes, and we were even discussing it yesterday. There's this almost sense of shameness that in a lot of traditional religious societies where it's deemed like you've done something wrong. It's an act of God, and therefore you've been punished. And there's this continuation of this, you've done something terrible, which was another link that we tried to get into there. And unfortunately, we couldn't get the audio going, but we tried to use the song Freak by Silverchair, which is an Australian group, who also tries to show these connotations in their music as well. And there's various other examples that we could use in pop culture where the freak show is actually predominant. There are a lot of music examples as well. One of the books that we decided to also use was Rosemary Garland's book on the freak show itself. Although hers is more of a historical perspective on disabilities, we're trying to tie her work into how Gothic literature has been perceived as a result of the freak show and its impact in certain writers. These are also just some examples that we have found in our historical research. Besides you having the circus like sideshow attractions, there are also private collections into abnormalities and deformities, and they were actually put on public display, sometimes in museums, but private collections. And there's still a lot of these that are around today, and it was almost seen as a form of antiquities. So we put out a call for paper. How long ago did we do that? It was over a year ago. Over a year ago now, and we received some abstracts for the book, which we're happy to share with you. And I guess we'll start with Catherine's.
Yes. Yeah, so Catherine Pugh wrote a very interesting abstract about the idea of how benign vampires in literature are disabled. So we found it interesting because it utilizes disability theories. I think she uses Colin Barnes, who was a great disability theorist from the University of Leeds, where I did my MA, incidentally. So she argues that like vampires who are not malevolent in literature are disabled by more malign vampires and their own actions. So I guess an obvious example would be the Cullens in Twilight, as they are vegetarians. So they cannot their refusal to drink human blood not only makes them unique, but they're actually kind of othered outcasts from the wider vampire community because they are not actively taking part in the wider traditions of what it is acceptable to be a traditional vampire. So in that way, they are disabled or defective in some light from their own kin. So next one. The next one is Laura Dadeville. Sorry, I probably butchered her last name, but anyway, she wrote a very interesting abstract on the liminal and the female body and impairment in Anne Rice's works, I think particularly Queen of the Damned from 1984. So yeah, she was looking at several female vampires in Anne Rice's works to look at how their female bodies and social attitudes and social attitudes lead to disablement in Rice's work for specifically female characters. If you've read Anne Rice's Vampire Chronicles, you'll know that there's like multiple characters from different cultures spreading from ancient Egypt up to like revolutionary France. So women in those societies obviously have vast arrays of portrayals. So that's why she's looking at different cultural context and embodiment of that. Okay.
No problem. And one of the other ones we found interesting was by Professor Kimberly McMahon Coleman from, at that stage she was with Wollongong University. I'm not quite in Australia. I'm not quite too sure where she's at the moment. But she basically looked at the Vampire Diaries and toxic masculinity and how poor fathering seemed to be this trope that stems in a lot of Gothic fiction works, but in particular in that, and they looked at this whole poor fathering leading towards certain intellectual disabilities and behavioral disabilities. And we thought that was very prominent for mental health issues. And I thought this was an important piece that we should include. And one of the other pieces we thought was fascinating was by Dr. Sarah Campbell, who looked at the thirst of the vampire itself as a disability. So it needed a specialized diet. It couldn't eat regular food like everyone else. And not only that, having this uncontrollable quench was also a disability within its own rights. And she looked at eating disorders in terms of how they could be viewed within vampirism as well. So we looked at eating disorders such as like anorexia and issues like, well, that's what her paper was about. And we thought that was a great way to tie in eating disorders as a part of disability as well. Which ties us into the last part of our book. We've actually had I guess you say, technical difficulty writing this book. It's about a year old already. However, our main editor unfortunately left due to some personal situations. So we've actually put a call out for a new editor, which hopefully we found as a result of this conference, which we're absolutely delighted. But we are pulling out a new call for papers, hopefully, 20th of January for anyone who's interested. So please, if you have any ideas or concepts and you want to talk to us about it, we're more than happy to have a conversation. As long as you are addressing disabilities in a respectful manner, of course, we'd gladly consider it as a part of the collection. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, guys. I'm looking around because Florin was supposed to chair this session. Sorry, and congratulations, both of you. That was very interesting. fantastic, in fact, and I'm thanking you for taking up this subject, because we've already had this discussion yesterday over Dracula beer with Bill as well, that there is a gap that needs to be filled as well. All right, does anyone have questions? Okay, Bill, would you? Yeah, I can just pass you the mic.
Yeah, but I'm going to be a pain and ask you about one of your contributors. The Sarah Gamble material looked really interesting. Is she working on anorexia, or is she working on obesity as well? Because I have got an absolutely fantastic potential contributor who's working in that sort of area as well. And what we don't want to do is obviously duplicate it. So if you could actually get that abstract across to me, I can get that to her as well. It's several people in this room know it's Gillian Wingfield, and she's an absolutely damn good critic.
Yeah, sorry about those online who didn't hear that. I was just saying, yeah, absolutely. We'll gladly forward you if you want to have a look and just let us know. Yeah, be fantastic.
Okay, is there anyone with comments, questions? Nina.
Okay, that's just idea. I don't know if you are familiar with a book, Vampires Never Get Old. Okay, this is like an anthology of short stories from a very modern perspective, and the subject of disabilities take place in some of the stories. So they are written by contemporary authors who also work in academic fields. So maybe if you contact some of them, you can find really good contributors to your work.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else in the room or in Zoom?
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm not sure if you're aware of it, but
No, I'm not. I haven't. Haven't heard of it. I'm definitely going to add it to my bibliography.
yeah, likewise. Thank you. Like, never heard of it. So yeah, if you have a copy or something, please. No, thank you very much for that. I appreciate it.
I was just saying that Adam keeps repeating that he's Polish, so that shouldn't be a problem. Well, you should work on it then. Okay. Do we have more comments, questions? Zoom. By the way, we have Yuri with us. Hi, Yuri. Oh, there is Ildiko.
Thank you very much for this presentation. It just occurred to me that a long time ago, I read a YA vampire novel. And the premise of that was that vampires actually, so humans are turned into vampires as they were. That is, there is no wonderful rejuvenation, regeneration. Okay, so if they were turned into vampires old, they stay old. And that might, like looking at ageism and old age as a kind of form of disability, and that framework might be a suitable, topic for consideration for your book, perhaps. So that just came to my mind.
Yeah, no, thank you. Absolutely. Especially in contemporary society where old age is maybe, this problem might be controversial to some, but in some areas of the world may not be valued compared to others. So definitely ableism and ageism, I think, are definitely interlinked. I don't know.
Unfortunately,
no, I think that's very valuable.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's more in the comic vein as it is presented, but I think it's still a very interesting, topic to look at even in that context. The other is a question about one of the abstracts, and it will just show my ignorance on the topic, so sorry about that. I just wonder if, that suggestion that in Twilight, this vegetarianism as a kind of disability, so it's volunteered. So does this count like one, like when you impose on yourself voluntarily? I'm not sure, but I don't know anything about that. So sorry about my question if it's asking about the obvious.
Well, yeah, it might be voluntary, but you could see the Cullens are still kind of ostracized to an extent by other vampires who actually do drink. Like, I mean, I haven't read Twilight in ages, but it's the Volturi or something who are actually more traditional vampires in the sense of blood drinking. So I guess you could. I mean, it's more just the idea of they're vampires who abstract from the norm. They don't do what vampires are supposed to do, whether it's by choice or not. So, yeah. So I think it still ties in, but yeah, I guess the Cullen is maybe not the best example, given that they are, yeah, as you point out, it is voluntary.
Yeah, but on that note too, I think what it also lies into is the ethics also, in terms of ethical vampirism, inverted commas, versus non-ethical vampirism, in terms of shall we kill or shall we not kill? So by making the correct ethical choice, you're automatically placed in this box. And that's still a form of ableism as well. So I do think it ties in that way.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I have to thank you, Ildiko, for this question. I was going to ask something about Twilight, but then Yuri would be announcing to the whole world that I'm the biggest fan of Twilight in the world, and that's doing it every year, so I'm kind of missing it this year. So
It's gonna happen. Calm down.
I think that it's actually an interesting question, because the one that also film specialists can attack in terms of disability. So if you're open to this, then the field broadens as well. Thank you so much for that. Is that anyone else? I think that we're having a delay anyway, so I'm going to pass the microphone to Florin.
Okay, so for the Peadar will remain for the next presentation.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, to be honest, the presentation is the slides are more for everyone else's benefit, because I can't really read them myself. But yeah, so I wanted to talk about Bram Stoker's lesser known novel, The Lady in the Shroud, from 1909, because I find it fascinating. If you are interested in Dracula, you kind of need, I would say it's almost required reading, because it's there's a lot of I don't know if I'd go so far as to say recycled ideas, but there's a lot of parallels to Dracula. I would call it an anti-Dracula novel. So yeah, next slide. Yeah, that's it. Next slide. Yeah, so the superficial similarities between Dracula and The Lady in the Shroud are they are both epistolary novels, which means they are told through diary entries, letters, and newspaper clippings. They both supposedly have vampires in them. They both have arrogant young British men who are thrust into a country and culture that they don't understand. And they both have a void. I'm going to continually mispronounce that word, but void. Yes. Those are very. However, it would be misleading to say that those are actually. Next slide. Yeah, because those are very superficial similarities. They are actually quite different, because in reality, the vampire in The Lady of the Shroud, whose name is Tetua Viserion, she's not actually a vampire. The whole plot twist within the novel is that she is pretending to be a vampire in order to protect her people from the imminent Turkish invasion. Now, you might be wondering what country The Lady of the Shroud is set in. It's set in a fictional land called the Land of the Blue Mountains. The geography is vague, but it's mentioned that it's in the Balkans, near Croatia. So, but it isn't actually given. There is no actual country given. So the basic idea is that a young man named Rupert St. Ledger is going to inherit his uncle's fortune if he goes to spend time in the Land of the Blue Mountains, where his uncle was something of a legend. So he goes there and and falls in love with this mysterious vampire, and fights the Ottomans. It's a fascinating opposite to Dracula. So I mentioned earlier there's a voivode as well. In Dracula, obviously the voivode and the count are the same figure. As Van Helsing deduces that they are actually one and the same person, and that they were the same Dracula who fought the Turks. the voivode in The Lady of the Shroud is named Peter Vissarion, and he's actually a benign figure, unlike Dracula. He firstly, he's not a vampire. Secondly, he is actually he's trying to protect his people. At the start of the novel, he is off in England trying to learn about constitutional rule, from so that he can bring back England's version of a monarchy to his of a constitutional monarchy to his people. So yeah, it's also worth mentioning. Next slide. Yeah, it's also worth mentioning that some general observations that also make The Lady of the Shroud stand out from Dracula. So the novel has a very modern prologue. It kind of starts in the middle of the action, and you're actually left with a kind of it's about a man on a boat, and he sees what appears to be a corpse like dressed in a wedding shroud, lying in a coffin floating down the river. As we learn later that that's part of Tetua's guise to as part of the undead story she's built around herself, that she spends time sleeping in a coffin to try and scare away her foes. But it's actually like the way her wedding shroud is, the way her white dress is actually mentioned. It's clear Bram is thinking about Lucy. There's a very direct as well reference to the figure of Death is personified, and he's not personified, but he's mentioned as by the locals of the inhabitants of the Blue Mountain as an old man with bat wings. If that doesn't evoke Dracula, I don't know what does. So again, Stoker was clearly thinking of Dracula when he had this in mind. There's as I mentioned, in the Ottomans don't really play a role in the original novel, apart from in Dracula's hastily sketched backstory. But in this, they are actually the antagonistic threat. They actually they invade the land of the Blue Mountains. The day is saved ultimately not by a small group of heroes like in the original novel, but by Rupert leading the band of figures, the entire nation to actually defeat them. I also find it's also interesting to point out that Tetua Vissarion is kind of another example of Bram Stoker's inconsistently written female characters. The most famous, of course, is Mina. She's at once extremely strong and intelligent, but also faints at any opportunity and also needs to be helped. So, for instance, she becomes the damsel in distress in the story, and she's kidnapped by the Ottomans, and Rupert and her father have to try and contrive a plan to rescue her. Another example would be from Stoker's writing would be the character of Nora Joyce from his novel The Snake's Pass, who is kind of written in the same vein. So it's a kind of fascinating example of Stoker's strong but inconsistent female characters. And also, it's also worth pointing out, finally, I find this really interesting that while Rupert still labors under the false assumption that Tetua is a vampire, he doesn't immediately think about killing her like Van Helsing and the others do with Lucy. In fact, his first impulse is actually to try and save her or see if he can reverse the curse. He even considers himself maybe voluntarily trying to become a vampire in order to spend eternity with her. So if she does have to be damned, he can be damned with her. He doesn't immediately think, I'm going to drive a stake through her heart. In fact, he doesn't think that at all. I mean, the reason is he's besotted with her, but it's just an interesting note because it compares that to the vampire hunters who are just like, well, no, we have to cut off Lucy's head and drive a stake through her heart immediately. Of course, unlike Lucy, Tetua isn't the vampire, but it is interesting just that Rupert doesn't actually want to destroy her, even when he believes she is a vampire. So yeah, I hope that's given you something to think about. I would say if you haven't read The Lady of Shroud, it is really worth reading, if only because it's I'd call it the anti-Dracula. I mean, it ends with Rupert becoming king of the Blue Mountains, which is interesting if you want to read that from a colonial perspective. It's not like the group of the young, the heroes in the original novel. They don't really integrate with the culture at all. I mean, Harker is at a loss to describe what kind of people he's come onto when he comes to Romania in chapter 2. So yeah, and he's there in the courtyard wondering about what kind of people they are. But Rupert kind of assimilates into the culture, or rather the culture assimilates into him, and he becomes its kind of chosen hero. So yeah, it's a fascinating I would call it the anti-Dracula of Stoker's writings, and it's a highly recommended read for that reason alone. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Peadar. That was very, very interesting. Do we have any comments, any questions, both from the room and from the listeners on Zoom? Well, I'm going to comment first of all, because I have a confession to make. I've only read Lady of the Shroud recently, and I found it absolutely fascinating as well. And it's also very rare that during this conference that we're meeting on, anybody touches on anything different than Dracula itself. So thank you very much for bringing it, especially that there are so many similarities, even if they are opposing the concept, as you say. So it's an anti-Dracula. So thank you very much for that. That was super interesting. We have Hans, I believe, that wants to say something.
I have one question. Do you have any idea why Stoker chose this time to have an imaginary country instead of a real country? In Dracula, he chose for a real landscape with real cities. And also, of course, the supernatural is real. And as you pointed out, supernatural is fake here, and the country is also fake. Do you see any reason why Stoker stepped away from using real geography in this novel?
I don't really know, to be honest. I mean, the best one I could come up with is that I think I'm not hugely up on the history at the time, but I think at the time the Balkans crisis, there was a crisis, a geopolitical crisis in the Balkans, I think, and it was obviously it would eventually lead to World War I. And I think Britain was involved in some of that. So maybe he felt he didn't want to reference. Maybe he felt he didn't want to get explicitly reference. I mean, it's interesting that he didn't just fall back on Romania or specifically Transylvania. I guess he just felt that would be too much of a recycle. I do think that the novel proves, incidentally, that he was because I know there is some debate as to whether Dracula is meant to be Vlad the Impaler, but I think that I think the Lady of the Shroud settles that. I think Stoker very much knew about Vlad, and the fact that the Voivode is kind of missing at the start, like Vlad. Like Vlad was missing for a while from his rule, and then he comes back as this kind of heroic figure. So yeah, I think that Stoker was very aware of that. So, but to answer your question, no, I don't know why he chose a fictional country. Outside of maybe trying to obscure real political tensions, or he just, I don't know, or maybe he just. Maybe he just couldn't think of a country. I don't know, but I want to give him more credit than that. So maybe it was just trying to obscure geopolitical tensions in the region. I need to look into that a bit further.
Okay. I was just
Thank you very
wondering
much.
why he stepped away from it. One little remark I just posted in the chat. Toita, the name of the girl, of the princess, in fact, also was the name of a goddess from that region, a very old goddess. So I think it's not completely a coincidence that Stoker picked that name.
Yeah, okay. I didn't know about the goddess link, because I don't think that's actually mentioned in the. Yeah, but it's interesting. she does play the role. I mean, she's not a deity, as I made clear, or she's not a vampire, but she does play the role of a protector for her people until she becomes a damsel in distress. It's interesting. So yeah, that's probably it's an interesting duality that's in the novel. She's both kind of a protectorate figure, but she's also hapless and needs to be rescued.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else has got comments either here or on Zoom? I believe it's all. Congratulations, Peadar. That was very interesting. Thank you so much.
Okay, my presentation, it's my second year here at the conference. Last year, I participated for the first time with a paper on similarities and differences between Batman and Dracula. And what Professor Crişan wanted to show you was the opening frame from the 1931 movie, from the 1931 Dracula movie, with Dracula's symbol, which was a bat. That was actually the first image of Batman's insignia as well, that Batman wears on his chest. So that would have been a very nice introduction to my presentation, but unfortunately, we had to skip that because technology made us very, very nervous, especially myself. So my presentation today is about a trilogy of graphic novels. The author of that trilogy is Doug Mensch. It consists of the graphic novels Red Rain, Bloodstorm, and Crimson Mist. The first novel in the trilogy, the first graphic novel, is Red Rain, published in 1991. It mainly presents an unusual situation for the Batman universe, that in which Count Dracula, the famous Count Dracula, comes to Gotham City and tries to raise an army. And what he does is to kill the homeless on the streets. And why does he do that? Because the disappearance of the homeless on the street is more difficult to notice by the authorities. And we have this symbol of the Red Rain, which is, of course, an announcement, an ominous announcement of Dracula. All the murders take place when the Red Rain ceases, but actually the inhabitants of Gotham City think that it's something due to chemical pollution. There is a rogue, however, a rebel in Dracula's army, and that rebel is his very daughter, Tanya, who has developed a synthetic serum to replace human blood because she realized the fact that killing human beings was not morally right, not ethically right. So she developed this serum and tried with her friends to rebel against Dracula, but she realized that she cannot do that by herself, and she and her group are not enough. So she visits Bruce Wayne night after night for a month and infuses him with vampiric strength in order to help them in the fight against Dracula and in their efforts to annihilate Dracula. Of course, that by the end of the novel, Batman manages to kill Dracula, impale him, and but in the act he is bitten by the Count and begins transforming into a vampire himself. Actually, the first novel ends with Batman's remark to Alfred that Bruce Wayne may be gone, but Batman will go on forever. The second volume in the series was published in 1994. It was called Bloodstorm. And in here we see Batman already a full-fledged vampire. He, however, manages to control his thirst for human blood by drinking that serum that Tanya has provided. But we can see that that serum, that synthetical blood, is growing increasingly inefficient, and he starts to lust for human blood more and more. The Joker appears on the stage. The Joker could not have missed this adventure. He is not a vampire. He is an ordinary human being. Well, not necessarily ordinary because we're talking about the Joker, but he assumes leadership of the vampires by manipulating them and by taking advantage of the fact that the vampires cannot see beyond their next victim. And he assumes leadership over them. He takes control of their group in order to kill the bosses of the crime families in Gotham and to take over their wealth. I found a very interesting, maybe it was well-intended, resemblance between the Joker as he was drawn here in this trilogy and the actor or the character that actually inspired the creation of the Joker by Bob Kane and Bill Finger, and that character is there in the right-hand side corner of the slide, and that's the character of Gwynplaine in the 1928 movie The Man Who Laughs, and the Joker there was portrayed by Conrad Veidt. And I saw a very interesting, maybe the author knew about, actually I'm sure the author knew about it, and the inker and the artist knew about it, and they made this nice intertextuality maybe. And they kind of paid a homage to the original fictional character that inspired the Joker. Another character that appears in the trilogy is Catwoman. She is here, Selina Kyle here, transforms into a werecat because she is bitten by a werewolf. And she is active at night in the nights of full moon. And this is how actually she and Batman meet. And Batman realizes that they develop an emotional bond, an emotional connection, a romantic one. And Batman realizes that whenever he is in her presence, he doesn't lust that much for blood and he can control his thirst. Unfortunately, good things don't last that long because Catwoman is killed by the Joker. And in a moment of anger, right after that, while fighting with the Joker, Batman breaks his neck, kills the Joker, and sucks his blood, which is the most important moment in the trilogy, because it's the moment when Batman succumbs to his instinct. Up to then, Batman was very well in control of his feelings, very well in control of his instincts, the aggression, the violence, the trauma, the anxiety that he has been experiencing. He had made this rule for his mission not to kill anybody because he was the one who witnessed the death of his parents and did not want to become the same monster that actually killed his parents. But here we see that this interesting limit situation in which he succumbs to his anger and kills the Joker. The second novel in the series ends with his friend Commissioner Gordon and his loyal servant Alfred killing Batman by driving a wooden stake in his heart, with the intention of preventing Batman from returning from the dead and transforming into a monster. The third and last novel in the series is Crimson Mist, published in 1998, and the opening scene is very revealing and very illustrative because Batman is pinned down to his coffin. Although his body is decaying, is rotting, is the image of a decomposing soul on the outside, actually on the inside, his mind is very active. He starts experiencing regret, remorse for what he has done, a lot of anxiety. And this is actually the state of paralysis, the state of the undead, as I see it, of the vampire. Of course, with Batman out of the picture for a while, crime flourishes again in Gotham City, and Commissioner Gordon and Alfred realized that they had made a mistake by killing Batman. But what they didn't do was the fact that they didn't behead him, that they didn't cut his head off. So they begin understanding that they might not have actually killed him. So they go back to his grave, they take the stake out, and Batman is alive again. But this time he is more ferocious, he is more cruel. He is on the way of becoming a full-fledged monster. As to say. It's interesting that he travels. Why the title The Crimson Mist? Well, it's because Batman travels in the shape of a crimson, of a reddish mist at night, or in the shape of a bat. It's interesting that in this graphic trilogy, the important characters see themselves becoming what they have always stood for, what they have always carried as a symbol. We saw Selina Kyle becoming a Catwoman, actually a Catwoman, a werecat, given the fact that she dressed as a cat burglar, and we see Batman becoming the very creature of the night that he embodied. We see him becoming the bat that he took as a symbol to instill terror in the criminals. There is a very interesting episode which brings into our memory other moments from the historical past. That episode is called The Night of the Crimson Mist, in which Batman kills everybody in Arkham Asylum. All the criminals in the famous rogues gallery in there, Poison Ivy, the Penguin, the Riddler, the Mad Hatter, the Scarecrow, and everybody else, and then he takes their heads and impales them in the fences and in the gates surrounding Blackgate Penitentiary, with their faces towards the prison windows as a threat and as a warning to the inmates there. And I saw a resemblance there with the historical episode in which Vlad Țepeș did that just to scare off Sultan Mehmed when he was going through Wallachia in order to catch him. Towards the end of the novel, there are, however, two criminals that escape Batman's killing spree, and those criminals are Two-Face, the famous Two-Face, and Killer Croc. They side with Commissioner Gordon and Alfred. They try to lure Batman in the caves beneath the ruins of Wayne Manor. They manage to do that. Commissioner Gordon annihilates Batman by shooting him with a wooden bolt. But then Killer Croc and Two-Face turn against Commissioner Gordon and are trying to kill him as well. At that moment, Alfred decides to sacrifice and to serve his master one last time by giving his blood for Batman to come back to life. Batman takes the sacrifice, eliminates Killer Croc and Two-Face, and then proposes to Commissioner Gordon either to become a vampire and rule the world together or be killed. Of course, Commissioner Gordon refuses. In the end, Batman convinces him, however, to blow up the cave in a desperate attempt to kill Batman along with the rubble, but the plan fails once again, and the one who is killed is actually Commissioner Gordon and not Batman. Then, as a last good deed for the city of Gotham, Batman walks into the light, into the sunlight, in order to be consumed by it, maybe in a desperate attempt to redeem his soul. And the only things that are left of him are actually the cape and the cowl, like a beautiful reminder of the hero that he once was. Now, to cut the long story short, at the end of this, after reading this very interesting graphic trilogy, I realized that although it is populated with fictional characters, with fantastic beings, vampires and werewolves, I kind of thought that it is actually the most human and humane one, because although Batman transforms into a vampire and does everything he does. Here we see it, I saw it as a metaphor for perfectionist, as a metaphor for somebody who is almost perfect, allowing or not allowing, succumbing in a way or another to instincts, failing, making mistakes, just like all other humans. And then I was left with some questions, whether we should condemn Batman for everything that he has done, or try and forgive him or redeem him in one way or another. And I came up with some questions. The first one being that, did Batman actually become a criminal by killing the Joker? Let's not forget that the Joker murdered the person he loved, the Catwoman, and was actually also trying to kill him as well. Was Batman a killer because he exterminated all the villains and gangsters in Gotham City and thus cleansed the city completely, culminating with his own self-sacrifice in the end, thus avoiding the risk of becoming a monster himself? Did he become a monster? Yes, no, not yet. And does his self-sacrifice redeem him of breaking his principle and becoming the monster that he had always fought against? And if so, does a hero have the right to make mistakes? And if he falls, does he have the right to redemption? I think the answers to all of these questions are up to debate, and maybe this is a situation in which we cannot look at the problem from opposite polarity. We should maybe try to take into consideration the gray area in there and accept both nuances, both the good ones and the negative tones as well into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bogdan. That was beautifully presented as well, as always, because last year it was fantastic as well. And well, congratulations to you both on the fantastic work. Yes, absolutely. That's what I started from, Marius. But you as a supervisor, as we've heard at the very start, are doing a great job as well, so well done. And do we have any comments, any questions about anything from anyone? Gabriela?
Is everything okay? Yes, I watched everything attentively, and I'm not very much informed about the subject, but I can say that following last year's presentation and this year's presentation too, I would very much like to read all these pieces of work. They are very, very interesting, and it is interesting how you can, how you could find relations between the heroes. And I was just thinking of your questions, the fact that Batman accepts that he has done mistakes. I think this is enough for us to forgive him. So he has accepted to have done mistakes. Congratulations, Bogdan.
Thank you, Gabriela.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wants to comment?